Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to Books on Air. I'm Suzanne Harris. Books on Air is a series where we do a deep dive into the author's passion. We like to find out about why they wrote the book. We like to find out what their writing process is like. And we also talk about what they want their reader to take away from the book. Joining me today is someone I cannot wait to introduce you to. She's just wonderful. Her name is Pam Henry Smith, and she's written a wonderful children's book called Meet Mack. Welcome, Pam. It's such a pleasure to have you here on Books on Air.
It's great to be here.
Well, I'll tell you a secret since it's just you and I talking today. I have a real soft spot for children's book authors. I think that they are some of the most creative and wonderful writers that I have the opportunity to interview, because you have to get an idea and then you have to make it be interesting to a child. And I think that that's just a fantastic thing to be able to do. So congratulations for Meet Mack. It's an adorable book.
Thank you.
You know, I learned a long time ago that all books have two stories, and your book is no exception. It has two stories. It has a birthday. There was a time when you didn't know you were going to write Meet Mack. Meet Mack is the book that you want your audience to read, and that's going to be the first book. But there's a story behind Meet Mack. Tell me how that all came about. How did you decide to share that story with the world?
It all started when I was teaching fourth grade at Moody Elementary in Whitehall, Arkansas. And I was the literacy teacher. I was teaching little fourth graders how to write stories. And I believe that a teacher has to model. That's the whole thing in teaching. You have to model and you have to be interesting. Boring is just not a part of my classroom. And the kids were the ones. I told the story several times to the kids, which I would always tell personal stories. And I told them about Mac and some of the things that he did, and they were just mesmerized. So when we said, you know, what are we going to write about? And I said, well, write about something that you've experienced. And they said, well, what are you going to write about? And I said, well, I don't know. And then everyone said, write about your bird, write about Mac. And so that's how it came about. And of course, I also had some wonderful memories with my grandparents. And so I wanted to include that too. And I've always instilled in my kids at school and my own kids. Grandparents were a big part of my growing up. And this was just one true story that I had with my grandmother.
I think that's one of the things that's so wonderful about the book, is that it is based on a true story about a real bird. I mean, Mac was a real bird. Let's give our viewers a little bit of an overview of what the book is about.
The book is about growing up, getting a parrot. My dad surprised us with a parrot. And I had asthma, so I couldn't play with the dog like everybody else could. So I thought, well, you know, the parrot will be mine. And I watched Grammy. She was very close to the parrot, and I wanted to be just like her. I wanted to be able to do the things that she did. Well, we had Mac doing all kinds of funny things. And we would move him from room to room. And so it was basically telling a story about how a bird got close to a family. It drove some of the family crazy. They ended up getting rid of the bird for a period of time. And then something very special happened. Something very special happened, and it was very unique. And the bird comes back into their life in a certain way. And it's just special. And Mac did remember everything.
You know, I think that children's books like that are special in themselves, because what happens when someone takes a children's book, and what age group do you think Mack is for?
You can read it to even young kids, but then it can go up to the 6th grade too.
Oh,
And, I've even had adults enjoy reading it because it's true. And you can study different aspects of it. There shows a lot of different things in the story. You get frustrated, you get mad, you laugh, and some of my kids even cried when I've read it. So it's just a touching story and it has several different qualities.
people will sit down, parents with children, maybe siblings with children, maybe grandparents with children, and they'll go through and they'll read the book and they'll look at the wonderful illustrations. They'll laugh about Mack and his exploits. They'll cry. You're absolutely right. But what you really are doing that I think is absolutely incredible and magical is that you are creating memories. And when they read that book, when they're 4, 5, 6, 7, when they're 27 or 37 or 77, they'll still have that wonderful, soft, focused memory of the person who read that book with them or to them. And I think that that's one of the very unique things that happens with children's literature.
Yes.
And you being a teacher, you understand that. I'm a former teacher myself, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. Sometimes when people write, something happens. They have some sort of experience themselves that they did not expect. Now, you've taken a true story and you've had to fictionalize it. You have to change it just a little because you're writing it for a larger audience. Did you learn anything about yourself when you were doing this?
Oh, yes. I mean, you tend to realize what a bond you have with your whole family and how special my grandmother was, my grandfather, how special the bond was between the dog and the bird you know, and even the funny things that my sister and I would come up with, getting us amused as young kids.
I can see a teacher taking this book and you could do so many things with it. You could have a series on parrots because parrots are unbelievable. I mean, they live for so long and they do form such bonds with their owners. Is that right? Is that what you guys
Oh,
experience?
it is. It does you form a bond and I promise after they read the book, I mean, even I didn't no longer have Mac because he passed away, but even I am sitting there thinking, I want to get a bird. I want to get a parrot. I mean, and I promise you, by the time any kid reads it, they're gonna want one too. And it was the best gift that my dad ever gave my grandmother. And it was something that lasted for a long time.
How long did Mac live?
62. We think he was like 60.
62?
We think he was like 62 years old.
Wow.
Not really sure on that, but he was very old.
I had heard that parrots had a really long lifespan. What kind of parrot was he?
It was an Amazon parrot.
And
And
they
he
they
was
brought
beautiful. Now you're going to read in the story, he went through a sad time. He was very vibrant and outgoing, and he would say anything to anybody. And then as the years go by and we had to get rid of it, he went through a really sad stage. And then the reunite, which I don't want to tell everybody about because they really do need to read the book, but you know, what the bird went through. And we learned that it's in studying parrots when we were doing the book. I did do a little unit on parrots. We checked into it. Parrots are just like regular people. They get depressed, they have anxiety. Everything that we have, they have it too. And it was really neat to let the kids learn that. Plus, they have more compassion for animals. After you read a book about an animal that's true, it makes them think about that.
I think it also expands the idea of a child because often we get so caught up with dogs and cats. because almost everybody has a dog or a cat or something like that. And so sometimes we forget about some of those other pets. And I think a parrot would be an extraordinary experience for a child.
Yes. And who knows, I might end up buying one. I don't know. I have been looking.
Have you really?
I really have. My kids are going, "Oh, Mom, do you really? You know how much trouble?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. But I also know how much fun they were." And a lot of things, the most trouble is the most fun. Having to go through trouble taking care of something, it means more to you.
How hard was it for you to take all of the adventures that Mac went through, to think about putting that in some kind of order and to think about putting it into a book in a way that other people would understand it and would recognize how wonderful and special he was? Because taking something that's happened to you in life sometimes is hard to fictionalize, if you'll pardon the use of that word, with your story.
Well, we knew of, my sister and I sat down a long time ago and we're talking about different things that we had used to do with Matt. Like put him on the patio and he would yell out at people. And then he would also talk to the dog and say funny things. So I kind of just wrote down several things. And in fact, the hardest part was leaving out which one was I going to leave out, because you can't put everything in it.
Well, that leaves Mac too. That makes me think it's going to be Meet Mack and it's going to be more adventures of Mac.
It could be. It could be.
Now, this is your first book, right?
Yes.
Do you think you're going to write some more?
I hope I do. I get overwhelmed. I stay pretty busy anyway, but I get overwhelmed thinking, which book am I going to do? Because every one of my stories started out in the classroom as my kids were writing their stories every year. And I just did it with them. So I've got other stories that I've written, but every one of my stories started out like a little paperback.
Oh, I love it. I love
That's
it.
how it started out. And everyone in my classroom had one. I mean, they wrote a book and we all, so every year, so I've got other ones. I've got one that started on a gerbil that got lost in the school. And then I've got one about my parakeets that the kids forgot to close the cage and they were out in my classroom the next day. So funny little stories that, yes, I'm thinking I am. I'm just got to decide which one I'm going to do. And then getting all the thoughts together. And it's going to be very similar to what I did with Mac. But, it's going to be probably more difficult. I'll have to think of little episodes that you can put in a book and put it all together and the characters in it.
I think you've done an extraordinary thing. You exposed those kids. And how old were they?
They were in the 4th grade, so that was like 10.
You exposed those
9 and 10.
You exposed them at a young age to creative writing and that experience. Do you know of any of those kids that have gone on to be authors or writers or anything like that as a result of that experience with writing stories in your class?
Oh, yes. I had a little girl that wrote a story in the 4th grade, and from what I understand, it's been published.
See, that's amazing to me. I interviewed,
But I stay in touch with my kids, mostly after they've graduated and everything. I've stayed in touch with one. I have a few that became doctors, and they've even asked me, "Did you ever publish that book?" And so now I'm going back and saying, I did it. Y'all gonna have to get the book. I did the book that I actually wrote it while they were with me. So that makes it even more special.
oh, yes, if they were in yes, that does make it even more special. And I was an English teacher too, and I have often wondered. I taught high school, so your kids you're not as close to your kids after you have them in high school.
Right.
Yeah. But it was always really interesting. You have some kids who seem to have that spark, that whatever it is that's indefinable about being able to write, because there's some there's something that happens in our brain that either allows us to do this writing or not. I mean, it's just kind of an amazing quality. Is that what you
Yes,
found as well with it?
that's right.
And
And it's important to them.
yeah,
And, like I say, the modeling is very important, getting close to your kids. We did not write the whole book in one day. I mean, we spread it out over months. And we had special times when we would work on our book and I would tell them, we're not going to write a book that I am writing about. No, you can't do that. You're going to tell it in a certain way and not come out and say that. But for them to sit down and write a little paragraph, and then I said, okay, now we're going to work on the illustration of that. So I told them, they wanted to model it, and they've got to where they were working together. It was a neat experience.
I love it. What about the illustrations in Meet Mac? Did you do those, or did you have an artist do those?
I had an artist I already had pictures that I did when I was teaching school, and I took that same pictures and showed it to an illustrator. I had a wonderful guy that was helping me, Art Crossett. He was a wonderful friend of mine, but he passed away like a month before it was published. But yes, he even did some pictures for me to send to the illustrator to help me out.
Well, I know that we have piqued the attention of any parent sitting in or grandparent or even older sibling that's watching us, that they're dying to know where to get the book. All they have to do is go to Amazon, and it's on Amazon. And the name of the book it's very easy. It's just called Meet Mack by Pam Henry Smith. Now, Pam, I know that you have got a website. So let's talk about your website. Let's give the address, and let's tell our viewers what they'll find when they go to the website.
It's under PamHenrySmith.com, and you can go in it. You can find all the different parts about it. I can write excerpts and keep up with my readers. But it's a very easy website to go into. I'm learning more about it. In fact, I told my kids they've got to give me another tutoring session on that. But we're all working together. But yes, I want people to look at it. I would love for people to buy the book. It is wonderful, and I'm hoping to do more.
Now, you're also on, I believe, Instagram and Facebook.
Yes.
Tell me how to find you on Instagram and Facebook. Is it just
On
under?
Facebook, I'm under Pam Henry Smith.
Now, do you have any? You said you have a plan, but when we were talking, you said you had a plan for the next book. You're going to give us a little bit of a preview of what that might be?
Well, right now I'm thinking I'm leaning towards the one about my gerbil that got lost in the school. It's true. And it did last for about a month and a half about a month that it was lost in the school. And you wouldn't believe the kids, we found it. And it was actually in the ceiling in the PE room, but it tells all the different things, where Stuart went. And, that is going to be a challenge to me because I am going to bring in fiction into it. I'm going to have to ad lib. I'm going to have to add more and make it exciting, but it is based on what really happened.
The Adventures of Stuart the Gerbil.
Yes. Well, they could almost say the adventures of being in my class. I mean, there was never a dull moment. Like I say, the birds got loose one day, the gerbil got loose. The kids take care of the pets. So, they didn't put the cage on the cage of the gerbil and it got out, Instead of getting mad at them, I said, well, we got to figure out what to do. And we went through a month looking for that gerbil.
Pam, you sound like you were an absolutely wonderful teacher. I just think of all of the kids that were lucky enough to have you for their teacher were just the luckiest kids in the world.
Well, thank you.
Sound like you really took the job seriously and did a great job. When our viewers pick up a copy of Meet Mack, And they sit down and they read it with whatever child they read it with, whether it's a grandparent reading it to a grandchild or a little group of grandchildren, or whether it's a mom or a dad or a sister or a brother reading it with a little younger sibling or a little younger child. You're creating that wonderful, soft memory for the person that reads the book and the person that gets the story read to them. What do you, as the author, really want the person that's reading and the person that's listening to take away from the book? Are there some themes there that you really want them to hit home with?
Yes, there's several things, but I can mention a few. I want all kids to realize that they have their own experiences right in front of their face. Mine was my sister and I had the experience of having fun-loving grandparents. And so I want everybody to realize that their grandparents won't be here forever. And listen to them, watch them, because they are special. And you're going to be in the same boat that they're in. So it's neat. So, and then I also want people to realize that birds are special, pets are special. They do have feelings just like we as people do. And the caring for a pet, caring for your family, I want that to be seen. I also want everybody to realize I came from a divorced family and I was so close, never thought of it as being in a bad situation because I had great parents. I almost, I felt like I almost had double of everything. So it was really neat. But the love and compassion that you can find in an animal and to a close family, always realize that true experiences can make you.
Pam, thank you so very much for being my guest today on Books on Air. It's been such a pleasure to meet you, and thank you so much for sharing wonderful Mack with us in your book, Meet Mack. It's just been delightful.
Well, I hope y'all go out and buy a book. It's a great story.
Thank you for joining us today here on Books on Air. Remember, you can pick up a copy of Meet Mack at Amazon.com. You can also see us on Authors and Experts right there. So we will really look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, keep reading, keep writing, and keep telling your own stories. Thanks so much for being with us today.